in our parliament, when the updated documents from CSIS came out, um, it obviously raised questions in parliament,
Right.
and Polivier went on the floor and was like, "What is this? Like, what is going on here? Why were these documents stonewalled? Like, what the hell?" And the response was, "Why are you politicizing this? What is the quickness with which they're looking for a partisan advantage is not just undermining Canadians' trust in the system, but interfering with the ability of Parliament to deal with this." That
So
is
there
a
was
direct quote from Justin Trudeau.
so he
So it was like, why the fuck are these people sending one of the most deadly viruses the world has ever encountered? Why are they sending it to a gain of function lab? Like, what is going on here? And the response was, by pointing this out, you are undermining faith in our institutions.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Before we get into the podcast today, I do have to give you a quick word from our sponsor. Today's sponsor is NordVPN. NordVPN is the official VPN of the October 7th terrorist attacks in Gaza. If you were ever wondering, how did these Hamas people, how did they plan and execute such a sophisticated attack without Mossad getting wind of what was happening essentially right on their doorstep? It's because they encrypted their communications with NordVPN. NordVPN is the only VPN trusted by Hamas to secure their communications. So if you need to keep your data secure, then you need the VPN that's trusted by Hamas. You need NordVPN. And if you use promo code Intifada at checkout, you can now get 20% off your purchase of NordVPN. That's NordVPN, the official sponsor of the October 7th terrorist attacks. And now, on to the podcast. All right, and here we are. This is the Bobbinsville podcast with your host, Bingo Bobbins. That's me, Bingo Bobbins. I am the host. With me today is a very special guest from the Great White North, a good friend of mine, a friend of the show. He goes by the name of Zin, and he's actually from the Islamic State of Canada. Is that correct?
Is the propaganda already that advanced that we're the Islamic State of Canada?
Yeah. Well, if we're going to be nation building and we're going to be getting bogged down in a quagmire, I feel like it should be against Muslims.
I'm not sure I'd go so far as to call us an Islamic State yet. We're still, I think, the most secular country in the world, but with a proud combination of Protestant Anglos and Francophone Catholics. But for the most part, no, we're not an Islamic State quite yet.
But Justin Trudeau is working on it.
I mean, he claims he'll be reducing our immigration numbers. Whether that lasts past the next election or not, I couldn't say.
So he is, because that was sort of the reason that I was going to have you on, because obviously you and I talk about Canada shit all the time, and me being a plebeian American, like I don't know what's going on up there, but you know hasn't sounded great from the Trudeau regime. But then when our guy Donald Trump was floating the idea of annexation, a lot of people in the Great White North there got kind of up in arms about it, right?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I mean, things haven't been great under Justin. It's definitely been a struggle, but it's a I'd say it's a bit different to go from thinking that your country is broken to thinking it can't be fixed and should be annexed by its neighbor.
Sure.
So I think you kind of have that combination of like I think right wingers across the board, I think that's a term I can use, tend to have a bit of like patriotism, kind of like national interest, right?
Yeah, like
Um,
Azov Battalion.
oh God, not maybe not quite that far, but I guess like okay, I'm not going to go so far as to say we have an Azov equivalent in Canada, but I mean yeah, their home is being invaded by a historical enemy to them, and they've kind of taken up arms and like to defend their territory, I guess, in their minds.
Yeah, and certainly historically, Ukrainians have had reasons to be butthurt at Russians.
100%. I mean, yeah, that is a that is a long and brutal history.
Whereas, America and Canada seem to get along pretty well, for the most part, other than you guys tariffing milk on us.
Yeah, and like from the 20th century onward, like we've been really close allies. Like our economies have been kind of tied together. I mean, especially Canada into America. We've fought on every battlefield basically since the Great War together. Um, and the Americans, I guess, turned around and decided to set our relations back about 150 years.
by suggesting annexation?
Yeah, all the way back to 1812.
What happened in 1812? Is that when you guys lit the White House on fire?
Yeah, during that war we did. You guys, I mean, Americans tell the story differently. Canadians view it as largely the first effort of America to annex Canada. Americans had issues with the way I think it had to do with British shipping or something. I don't remember all the details of how it started, but you guys ended up invading Britain's colony on North America. You conquered what is now Toronto, what was Wick at the time. Held that for a bit against Canadian kind of insurrection.
Yeah.
Um, and then the British wrapped up the Napoleonic Wars and sailed across the sea, and the rest is history, and we're still an independent nation.
Well, at the time, though, you weren't because you were a British colony.
Yeah, I mean, colonies for Britain had a fair amount of autonomy. Um, this was also in the wake, I guess, of your like back in 1776 um, revolution against the British Empire. At the end of that, a lot of your English loyalists who didn't want to betray the crown, England, on behalf of them, purchased a bunch of land from Indians, and we moved north and settled there.
And
So
then,
that would be in the Ontario region.
and is that when you guys rounded up all the First Nations and put them into camps?
No, that didn't happen until like the 1950s when we started genociding. That didn't actually happen.
Right.
Um,
Well, tell me more about that because that's a crazy story. Like, they just straight up, like, they just were like, hey, this happened, and they didn't really have any evidence for it, right? Like, it's just like total revisionist history. Like,
yeah, it's almost like it's invented almost whole cloth. I think the grain of truth is that there were some unnamed graves in a graveyard, mind you. But this could have been any number of things. They've investigated thoroughly the residential school system, and I'm not like there's a lot more to get into on that. I actually didn't think we'd even be talking about that today, so I didn't read up too much on it. But the basics is that they claimed this a couple of years ago that we had basically a genocidal, like physically genocidal program against First Nations people, and
yeah,
that this the residential school system, by the way, wrapped up in the 90s. Like there are people alive today
we're in
who
them.
yeah who are in them or their parents were directly in them. Um, but no, they have not found a mass grave. They have not found a single body. Um, a number of Catholic churches, because they were involved in the residential school program, were burned down over the years since this was announced. But nobody has found a single body or any evidence anywhere that would constitute a mass genocide, like a mass physical genocide. The narrative has shifted to cultural genocide, and if you want to tie the term genocide to that, I think there could be an argument there. I personally, like, it was a social engineering program for sure, like Soviet style. We're gonna combination of Soviet and British style. We're gonna like civilize the savage type mindset. But in terms of a physical genocide, no, there has not been a body. We did not mass slaughter the natives.
Oh, you're really missing out on an opportunity there. But it's sort of it's like the trans people. Like if you don't use their pronouns, that's genocide, right? That's
Yeah, like we have very very careful definitions of genocide, and now suddenly everything is a genocide. I guess I don't
well, the good news is that if everything's a genocide, then nothing's a genocide. So, I mean,
I don't know if that's a good. I don't know if that's a good thing.
well, when we annex Canada, we're going to set up a penal colony system in like the northern part, and we're going to send you all of our Democrats.
Oh God, populate the Arctic with the Democrats. I thought you intended Greenland to be a gulag.
Yeah, no, Greenland for sure, because then it's also got a moat. Like you can't get back. I guess you could get on a boat, but it would be harder because we would keep tabs on the boats and we would know who was on the boats and who wasn't. Uh, so anyway, getting back to I the
Back on topic.
yeah you mentioned that Justin Trudeau is now claiming that he's going to bring down the number of immigrants, and that's basically because he's sort of finally read the read the room. Is that basically what's going on?
I think so. Like the Liberal Party is always motivated by basically what'll likely get them votes.
And they're
Um,
they're a little
I,
bit different than our Democrats, right? Like you were explaining this to me once before. It's not necessarily a one for one, right?
the
Because you have a
I would say
parliament.
yeah, of the parties, ideologically, our Liberals are most closely aligned with your Democrats.
Okay.
And of the parties in Canada, they are the most similar to an American party. Like there's a lot of, I guess, jabbering online about how our conservatives are just American Republicans, but I would say the Liberals are actually much closer to American Democrats, like further to the left, for sure.
Yeah.
But like ideologically, the same sort of issues you guys have dealt with from your Democrats and
Well, that would
further to the
make
left.
that would make sense as they're sort of a globalist persuasion, right? Is so then
Yeah,
the
for sure. Yeah.
Canadians and the Americans and the British and the Germans.
Yeah, the Liberals are definitely the like the Canadian branch of that particular corporation.
Yeah. I like exactly the corporate corporate liberalism. So and then the conservatives you said are not quite as much of Republicans as Republicans, or I mean they're
And
different.
they're different. Yeah, they're different on the social issues. Like if like they're a very very calm, I guess Republican might be a way to think of it. But like your people are always rambling about how the Republicans just need to move to the center, right?
Yeah,
It'd be something like that. Like there's no real interest in the conservatives to do something like cut our health care or
bring
like
a
anything like that. Yeah,
bring a
like no
chainsaw to CPAC.
that like they'll I really hope that they do go after our public sector, but that's just because it's become so bloated.
Yeah,
Um yeah, because like liberals liberals use our public service as essentially a very complicated vote buying program where they'll
yeah,
expand it to ridiculous like basically expanded to ridiculous proportions while they're in power. Um, and when the conservatives get in, they have no choice because so much of everything is now going to supporting a public service that isn't productive.
Right.
This is very different than like your actually needed, necessary bureaucrats or administrators. Like it's departments and departments of people who are permanently on leave, kind of thing. Um, so I mean, yeah, it would be
Well,
nice if they
especially
did.
especially post COVID, I would imagine they're all like, "Oh, I'm working remote."
Yeah, they got ordered back to the office and are supposed to be working, I think, in office 3 days a week.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, but there's a lot of there's a lot
Bullying?
of what's that? Yeah, and not just that. There are a lot of very non-productive people to begin with.
Sure.
Like any department, you've got 10 people working, right? One of them is good, two of them are okay, and the rest are you either never see them, they're on vacation, or they're just not doing anything, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's very much a culture of make it look like we're working, make it look like we're doing our job, and nothing's getting done.
But there's not
And
even really anything to do, right? Because these are a lot of like like what kind of do you guys have? Because I remember I was watching, uh, what's his name in Argentina, Javier Milei, going through the Argentinian like departments, and he was going afuera and like ripping them up, like get out of
yeah,
here. Like, do you guys have like a Department of Women's issues or whatever? Like he like
yeah,
Argentina had a Department of Women's
yeah.
studies. Like,
We actually we actually do, and they have all the names you'd sort of expect. You've seen them a million times,
yeah.
um, with disproportionate salaries to what they do. Oh man, I wish I'd actually looked up the salary information before getting on this, but I know one one person in my friend group works for a department that is responsible for deciding which like piece of indigenous artwork gets funding, and she makes between 80 and 95,000 a year.
Is that Canadian?
That is Canadian, so to an American it doesn't sound like much, but let's check one thing. What is the
I was doing it too.
Canadian salary in Ontario?
So
Um,
80,000 a year Canadian is about 56,000 USD, which is not very high. But dude, that's the other thing that's crazy about Canada, because spoilers, like you and I have worked together in the past,
yep.
and it was at a Canadian company, and I was surprised at what that guy thought he was going to be getting away with paying software developers. And I was like, dude, what?
The median salary in Ontario is anywhere between 42 and 54 Canadian. So she is making significantly more than the median salary in Ontario.
Yeah, she's making like twice the median salary in Ontario.
Yeah. For Indigenous art funding, there's one thing I want to check too.
That's crazy. 42,000 is like 30K a year USD, and that's in a city. I would imagine Ontario is pretty expensive too, right?
Yep. Um, for comparison, in terms of another, I guess, public sector job, a private in the forces makes about $39,000 a year.
39,000 USD?
No, 39,000 Canadian.
Yeah, sorry, Canadian. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's probably about what a private, like privates don't make a lot, but you get room and
Corporal
board.
corporal goes up to 72,000.
Oh, really?
Oh, starting at after training is 43 Canadian. Uh,
That's actually, I think that's actually kind of good. I don't think I was making
Probably
shit when
compared.
I was a corporal. Like, but I was that was like 20 years ago. But well,
And yeah, 20 years, inflation, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just giving it as in relation to the person who
yeah, the
is
person
deciding
who's
which
doing,
indigenous artwork gets funding. Our soldiers are paid significantly less than that person, uh,
yeah,
even when they go up to corporal.
yeah, even as an NCO. So today,
Oh, our ranks are slightly different. It's private and corporal or NCM. Master corporal is an appointment. That's the first of the lower NCOs.
oh, okay. So this is like private first class or lance corporal,
Yeah,
maybe.
Lance Corporal. I think I've looked up the rank equivalents before, and for the Marine Corps, it'd be a Lance Corporal.
Okay, so an E3, dang dude, an E3 makes $90,000 a year right now in 2025. That's actually good.
Wait, in the States?
Yeah, that's what it's saying. That's what Google is telling me right now. In February
Is that
2025,
Google AI? Is that Google AI or is
it
that
is Google AI though. Maybe that's
okay,
maybe that's
okay,
including base housing and shit.
okay.
Active duty yearly salary for E3 is 29,000, and then yeah, okay. So no, not 90. Where's it getting that number? That's retarded. Yeah.
Maybe that's danger pay in a combat zone, like with all those
Yeah.
kind of allowances or something, or maybe Google AI just made it the fuck up.
Yeah. Well, it's pulling it from ZipRecruiter. I don't know what that is, but that's not accurate. That's
I find ZipRecruiter's salaries for everything is massively not corresponding to reality right now.
yeah. Have you been looking? I haven't heard of ZipRecruiter before.
Yeah, it'll give you like average salary in this area type stuff, and I look at it, and then I look at the job listings and offers in those areas, and they don't seem to match.
Interesting. I wonder where they're getting their data from.
I honestly have no idea. Maybe it was like years ago. Like I don't know, but it doesn't seem up to date.
Yeah. But that was what I was getting at though, right? Is like so you're in a major city and housing is expensive in Canada
Yep.
and salaries are kind of shitty
Yep.
and that's why people are pissed like to the but somehow so like we had like I think we have a similar thing in the United States, but I wouldn't even say that it's as bad as Canada. Yet that was enough to get people to vote for Donald Trump. But like it seems like Trudeau's been in there for like a decade.
Yep. He's been in office for 9 years. We don't have we have a maximum amount of years they can go without calling an election. It's 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Harper actually introduced that legislation. I'm not sure what it was before, but it was it. So every 4 years we're supposed to have an election. But a person can be elected as many times as the population decides to vote for them.
Okay, so like an FDR situation. So he has won a couple of elections.
Yeah, he won one majority and two minorities. He called early the last election during the COVID hysteria.
Yeah,
I think in hopes of securing a majority.
yeah,
But he ended up with a minority. I think he picked up 2 or 3 seats from like the NDP
and
and
that's
and
because
from the Conservatives.
in the parliamentary system there's more than two parties, so it's not like the prime minister is not the president necessarily, right? Like
No, the
he's
prime
just a
minister.
leader.
Yeah, he's typically the leader of the party. I think there are exceptions to that. But you actually vote for your local MP. So when I go into the polls and whenever they decide to call the election, I won't be voting directly for, say, Olivier. I'll be voting for whoever the MP from my area is.
Yeah, and so then it would be basically like it would be like if Mike Johnson was the prime minister of America because
Yeah,
he's
I
because he's the
assume
leader of
that's
the.
your district. Yeah,
No. Well, he's the Speaker of the House, right? So the Republicans have a majority in the House, and he's the lead Republican, so he would be like the Prime Minister.
yeah. I think I think. We also have like a speaker in the House who he is appointed by the prime minister. We also have Polivier is the head of the Conservative Party, but
Yeah,
Andrew Scheer, I'm trying to find his exact title, is the what's it called here? Basically the blah blah blah. I'm trying to find the name of the exact. office. But basically, he's the representative of the conservatives in the House, kind of thing. Um, and while I scroll through trying to figure out what the exact term is, feel free to. Leader of the official. No, that's from 2017. Leader of the official opposition is Poilievre.
Yeah,
Um,
as conservative.
opposition House leader. That's what it is.
Okay, so I think we have ours is like the House Minority Leader.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
So yeah,
but you only have one house. Like you don't have two houses.
we actually do.
You have a House of Lords.
Actually, I just laughed, but this actually provoked an existential crisis when you get into it. So we have the Senate and the House of Commons.
Right.
Bills have to match before they can receive royal assent, and
Yeah.
the Senate is entirely appointed by the Prime Minister on the advice of the Prime Minister. Um,
So Trudeau
in
could just
history,
stack. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
in history, the Senate has been borderline like a rubber stamp system. There have been 3 times that it has, for lack of a better term, vetoed a bill.
Mm-hmm.
The first was, I think, in 1911 or 1912. It vetoed the Shipbuilding Act, um, because basically the government was trying to pass a bill that would spend $35 million at the time to build a bunch of ships for England, when we already had legislation passed that was significantly less expensive to Canadians, and we were going to build like 8 battle cruisers for ourselves. This was during the UK's imagined arm race with a naval arms race with Germany. The next time was in 1988.
Quite a gap.
Yeah, it was in 1988 when the conservatives at the time were trying to pass the free trade agreement with the United States. The Senate said they would pass it provided the conservatives held a general election first, to which the conservatives agreed. Um, they held the election. Conservatives won a majority. We passed the precursor to NAFTA. Then in 1991, after abortion had been decriminalized in Canada, the Conservatives introduced legislation to restore some of the criminalization of it, and the Senate shut it down. It was a split vote in the House, and then the Senate shut it down. Those are the times that stand out in my mind. So the idea of it at its founding was that it was the air quotes sober second thought. Uh,
Yeah.
John A. Macdonald invented this. Like, the Prime Minister appoints them. It'll help us curb the excesses of democracy, kind of thing. It has functioned as a patronage program where the Prime Minister will give party donors and other people like that they want to just basically give something to a place to sit. They have always kind of rubber stamped bills, and they collect a salary and then retire at 75. The idea also behind it was that it would give regional representation to the country.
Okay.
So each region, this actually killed me to learn. So the regions of Canada, according to our Senate,
Now
are
those are different
Ontario.
than the provinces.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. This is where things get really funny. According to the Senate, the regions of Canada, and each region gets 24 senators total, 24 spots in the Senate total.
Mm-hmm.
So the region gets the representation. The regions of Canada. Ontario gets 24 senators. Quebec gets 24 senators. Western Canada gets 24 senators. That's broken down. Alberta gets 6 senators. BC gets 6 senators. Manitoba gets 6 senators. And Saskatchewan gets 6 senators. The Maritimes get 24 senators. Nova Scotia gets 10. New Brunswick gets 10. And PEI gets 4.
The Maritime. Does anyone live in the Maritimes?
No.
That's like those are like the islands up in the
Oh,
up in the up next to Greenland, right? Like
yeah. Yep. Um, Well, yes and no. There the provinces essentially uh, east of Quebec and sort of like to the south of Quebec, but they also, for whatever reason, Newfoundland is just included in the other category where there are 9 senators, 6 for Newfoundland. So Newfoundland, with a population of 500,000, has, and I don't even know what their GDP is. I didn't even look. Uh, has the same representation in the Senate as Alberta, which is our richest province. Um,
Now, but
so they get 6.
Alberta is somewhat sparsely populated, though, right? Because it's kind of in the country.
Yeah, Alberta has a population of, I think it's around 4 million.
Okay, so quite a bit more.
Yeah, it's 4.2 million in 2021. I'm not sure what it is in 2024. They're the recipient of our highest amount of interprovincial immigration. So people move from everywhere else in Canada to go to Alberta. Yeah, so 4.2 million.
What's good?
Ontario something like 14. Huh?
What's good about Alberta? Because I hear that like Alberta is like based.
Yeah, Alberta is like it gets called Canada's Texas, and I guess that's a way to look at it. Like they brought their oil. They tend to have a much like
Edmonton is there.
yeah. Edmonton's their administrative capital
Calgary.
and
I've heard of
capital.
Calgary.
Calgary is a pretty nice city. It's a very modern city. I lived there for a couple of years. Yeah, it's a great place to live. It's like I'm not gonna come out and just say it, but the highest job availability in Canada is probably in Alberta. Best wages are in Alberta. They have our highest per capita GDP at the moment, and they consistently have our highest per capita GDP. They're the only ones that compare to the per capita GDP of a state when you switch it over to American dollars, and they I think just beat out Mississippi.
Well, that's not saying a lot, but I understand where you're getting.
Yeah, yeah,
Mississippi. No offense to anybody from Mississippi who's listening, but they're not doing the best in terms of their
yeah,
GDP.
yeah. Um, when you go to per capita, yeah, this is.
It's pretty. I'm looking at pictures of it right now.
Oh yeah, it's like that's the thing about Canada. We're an
It's like
incredibly beautiful country.
it's like Colorado, kind of. It's by the Rockies. I'm looking
Yep,
at little
Colorado
towns.
and Wyoming as well is
Oh
very
yeah,
close. North Dakota's on the border.
probably more
Uh,
like Wyoming in terms of
yeah,
politics.
yeah. Alberta.
Because Colorado, unfortunately, like a bunch of people in California moved to Colorado, and then they were like, "What if we voted to make it just as bad?" And
Yeah,
and so
People from Toronto do that to Alberta as well. Like, wow, this province is garbage. We're going somewhere else. Let's make this province garbage too.
yeah, that's a bummer. See, you shouldn't be allowed. That's why we need walls.
God, that would be quite the wall actually to build
To
between the
Alberta.
east and the west. Yeah,
Just
Banff is out
all the
there
way to
too.
the North Pole. Just
Yeah,
wall.
God.
Okay, so the Senate seats are like wildly disproportionate to uh, the populations that live in the regions, but it kind of doesn't matter because they all just get. Do they get appointed every time a new prime minister comes in, or only when they age out, like the Supreme Court?
They only get changed when they age out or retire. There is also, if they miss 2 sittings of parliament, they lose their position. Um, like I said, there's only been a couple times in history that this veto power has been used, but
But they do have to go to
the
work.
yeah, the current
So,
makeup of the Senate is almost entirely appointed by Trudeau, and he's going to have 6 more vacancies to fill before he goes.
e
I this is a powder keg, and when you dig into the people that he has appointed, okay, so in fairness to Trudeau, he established an advisory committee to make it more merit based. So the advisory committee reviews candidates and then presents them to the prime minister.
but
I think you're
what is
well
the
aware of this independent of the independent council of experts grift, though.
Sure, yeah.
Um, Alberta in the 80s, and I think this was kind of a solution to Western alienation, created a senators in waiting program where the population of Alberta votes for people they would like to be senators. So far, most like our governments tend to respect that. If a vacancy comes up for Alberta, they put that in. Since Trudeau's taken office, he has not accepted one of their suggestions. His independent council of experts has not accepted one of their suggestions. I dug into a few of the senators he's appointed. They are all either longtime Liberal donors or specifically activists.
Yeah. So that would be like that's basically like that's bad news because and you said he's appointed how many
He has appointed 93.
out of
I
out
don't
of
think all there are 105 total. I don't think all 93 that he's appointed are sitting right now. I think some of them may have retired, but the overwhelming majority of our Senate
is
will have been
Trudeau
appointed
appointed?
by him.
Because
Yeah.
they were all probably boomers and they're all probably retiring like in the last 10 years and so he's just gotten lucky basically.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah, 10 years is a long time. And a lot of these people aren't retiring anytime soon. So this is actually going to be quite the test for our system. And just reflecting on it and having dug into it a bit, it seems like the only reason this hasn't been a complete disaster in our history is that we've typically had sane and reasonable governance. They've acted the way they should, stepped in only in pretty like egregious circumstances, like the Shipbuilding Act, and for the most part, have respected the elected will of the people.
Yeah, Canada, I feel like
Who knows if that's going to continue? Like
Canada
I can't. I saw a powder keg when I saw that.
Canada is like government by politeness. Like
Yeah, that's one way to put it. I would say we've had fairly sane and reasonable governance for most of our history, with some
although
significant counters to that.
How do you say his name? The conservative guy,
Yeah, Polyev.
Poliev. He seems pretty based. Like I saw like a video of him like eating an apple. You know, I like that. I like the sort of casual. He was like casually like dismantling some journo and while eating an apple.
Yeah, like I'm likely going to be voting for him. Um, yeah, he's been a decent leader for the Conservatives so far. Like he's a good like opposition House leader.
But if he
He
gets in there and you guys start passing like so like let's say that he goes in there. He's not really like a Trump though. Like he's not going to go in there and be like we're deporting the Pakistanis.
No, he's not like Trump, despite all of the efforts in our media to say that he is. He's not. He's really not a populist. Like he's a populist insofar as he's like life has gotten really bad for everybody. There are
Yeah,
specific legislative reasons that life is currently bad.
right.
Uh, this is my approach to fixing these issues.
I feel like
Um,
populist, like the pejorative populist, is always used against somebody who the establishment doesn't like. But then they're also like, oh, our sacred democracy
yeah,
can't withstand a populist. And it's like, well, wouldn't a popular candidate win a democracy? Like, what do you even like? What is the
yeah,
difference between a populist and a just a Democrat?
yeah. Like yeah, it's I like all of that. All of that nonsense is hilarious to me. Um,
But
like
he's
even if you take the like you said the term populist, so somebody who has the support of the people. I mean, I guess they try to like the populist like setting the will of the population against like the establishment. I guess is what you could look at it as, like using misinformation to control the people. Like I don't know what they're afraid of.
you mean you mean like CNN or something? Like if there was a if there was a if there was some if only there was like some organization some government organization whose entire job was like managing intelligence and disseminating information that may or may not be accurate, you know, like that would be apparently populist. Like that would be a problem that we should get rid of. But so let's say uh, the conservatives get in there, and maybe they're not going whole hog, but they're like, hey, we're gonna maybe calm down on this immigration, because that's one of the problems with your housing. Like housing prices are high because you have high immigration, and wages are low because you have all this supply of labor, right? Like basic
Yeah. Yeah,
economics.
it there's so much, yes. The like immigration has definitely further driven up our housing costs, our rent costs, driven down our wages. Like this is what you expect from the amount of immigration we've brought in. There is also tons of just bureaucratic and legislative nonsense that anybody has to go through to get anything approved.
Yeah,
Um, there are a lot of factors driving up our housing costs, but yeah, I like it definitely immigration.
yeah. So they're like, okay, we're gonna slow the roll on this immigration. They pass some legislation, immigration legislation, uh, and then all the Justin Trudeau appointees, including the ones that he appointed over the ones that Alberta wanted him to appoint, just go, nah, you can't. Like, is that
Yep,
something that could possibly happen?
that's 100%. There, yep, 100%. That's exactly what I was getting at. I see a powder keg there. Thankfully, that particular question, conservatives have not said much about immigration except vague. Like we'll tie it to the price of housing, and we'll tie it to our services available. I'm not going to even lie about because it would just be a lie to say that they've said anything meaningful about immigration.
So they're basically
Uh,
they're where the Republicans were in like 2012. I,
Maybe I don't remember the Republicans in 2012. They have their own policies independent of that. Thankfully, the immigration issue wouldn't even be an act of parliament. It would just be an administrative change. There's nothing stopping anybody, like the prime minister, from coming out and saying, "Okay, we are now accepting zero immigrants this year." But say another issue with Justin Trudeau that kind of riled people up for years were changes to the Firearms Act.
oh yeah,
Um, So if like the conservatives now have enshrined in their like policy document that they are going to implement the simplified classification system, they're going to replace our kind of patchwork of laws that we have right now with a simplified classification system. Like pistols will be restricted firearms, but legal again. Most long guns will fall into the category of non-restricted. Um, if and they've committed to removing the ability to use an order in council to reclassify anything that's already been classified. That's what Justin Trudeau did to ban our air quotes assault style firearms initially. He changed the category of a number of restricted firearms, like the AR-15,
yeah.
to prohibited. That's how he did that.
And it was like an
Uh,
administrative, like,
yeah,
just like, oh, we're
literally.
changing the definition, and now the definition falls into a different category, and so we
Yeah,
don't
he
have to
he
get
didn't even.
legislation because we've redefined. We're playing word
Yep.
games.
Yeah, so yeah, he didn't even have to change how it was defined. He just said, like by name, like these models are now prohibited models. Um, what was I saying with that? So if they say pass this piece of legislation and the House of Commons, because they're still likely to have a majority, all says, yeah, we're good to go. Like there's nothing in our actual like constitution or anything that would prevent this from going through, and the Senate says no, we don't want to pass this, like we don't want to ratify this, like for whatever reason they come up with, they can kill it, they can kill
Yeah, and there's no recourse other than like murder.
it. Yeah, basically there's no other
Because once
system
they're once they're
that
dead, you get to appoint a different person.
funny enough, okay, so it wasn't a murder, but back when Brian Mulroney was trying to pass his GST bill in the 90s, he was a conservative prime minister, and it was a liberal control. It was a liberal Senate. Like they'd been appointed by anyway. They had affiliation with the Liberal Party.
Sure.
Um, they said no. like we're not going to ratify this. It did not. They didn't get enough votes in the Senate for it to ratify. So Mulrooney used a bunch of open appointments plus like this random allotted. You can appoint. I think it's 8 ministers, provided they're from 2 or 3 different regions of Canada, like no more than 2 from each different region of Canada. So he just appointed a bunch of senators and then passed it again. That's the closest you get to, but I don't think the numbers exist for Olivier to do that before about the middle of 2030, the middle of the 2030s, even 40s.
So that's like stacking the Supreme Court. Basically, he was just like, well,
Yeah,
sounds like we need some more senators.
yeah, pretty much. Um, but I don't think we'd even have the numbers to do that with the amount that Justin Trudeau has been able to appoint to the Senate. So that was actually kind of that was a situation that I wasn't even aware of. Like nobody thinks about our Senate up here, right? Because they
Yeah,
just sit
they don't
there
do
and you're
anything.
like, okay, like yeah, here you go, rubber stamp. But interestingly, each time it has been used, it has been by uh, liberal appointed Senate. That does go all the way back to the Shipbuilding Act that I talked about, which
Which
I
was
think was a
liberals.
yep, which was honestly a pretty reasonable use of it. In fairness,
Yeah, because they.
um,
Why would the conservatives want? I guess this was a long time ago, but they were trying
yeah,
to
this
help out the British for World War,
yeah,
like in the build
yep,
up to World
we
War One.
yeah, exactly. We had our own shipbuilding act that would expand the Canadian Navy, and like the couple articles I looked at, literally our Minister of National Defense, it was either him or the Prime Minister at the time, went and had a conversation with the Lord of the Admiralty at the time. You might know the name Winston Churchill,
Yeah,
and
the
came back
the
to Canada
the
with the
true
deep
villain of
conviction.
World War II, as I understand it.
Came back with the deep conviction that we needed to spend $35 million and build a bunch of ships for the British.
Dude, one thing I will say about Winston Churchill is he was able to bullshit some North Americans to fight his war for him.
uh, old Churchill.
So so these guys, what do you think the odds are that they do pull some shit like that? Like they just start blocking conservative things, like, or would they be concerned about like a quote unquote constitutional crisis, or would they be like, nah, we can do this?
Um,
I mean, I guess we don't know until it happens,
like
but
I really like I try not to be super conspiratorial or like super like black pilled about stuff,
yeah.
but I think we've seen the behaviors of. I think we've seen the behaviors enough that I would assert with some confidence that we are going to see a lot of shenanigans from them. I'm really not. I'm not looking forward to that if it happens, because I don't know what the recourse ends up being.
Well, uh, we've got an offer for you.
Yeah.
But see, here's the thing. Like, here's the way that I look at it. Right? Is like, first of all, how many of those senators are Chinese spies?
Hopefully, none of the senators in particular.
But we don't know.
The yeah the influence campaign of China on the Liberal Party in particular. I don't think we know the extent of it right now. There's been a lot of shenanigans to hide it. Um,
It's pretty
but yeah,
crazy, though, right?
yeah, like it's really not good. Um, I think there are at this point known that 11, and I think the 11 are specifically Liberal MPs.
Yeah, and these are people who were
Knowingly,
elected,
yes,
Parliament people in Parliament.
yep, knowingly benefited from interference from Chinese influence. This is done typically, I think CSIS described it as basically influence campaigns through things like WeChat and students here.
Now,
Students interfering in leadership elections.
I was
Yeah.
told that when a country interferes in the elections of another country, that's bad.
I certainly do think it's bad. I certainly think it's bad. This is a bit more this is a bit more direct than Russians buying Facebook ads.
Yeah, they're like
Um,
paying.
yeah, like on the ground. This is like on the ground type stuff, and I don't want to get too far into that particular aspect of it. We do have a couple of well detailed times of extensive Chinese espionage operations on our soil. I'd prefer to see more information come out about that particular, like the election interference stuff.
Yeah,
But China has definitely benefited massively from the liberals being in power as long as they've been.
and is that so? I know that they're like China is buying up land in Canada, like minefields, not minefields. Hopefully,
The
you guys
mine?
don't have any minefields in Canada, but
No,
like
we
mining
land mines. Yeah,
land.
the mine incident. I can't think of what its name is right now,
The one up
but
in the
it's
north that John
yeah
Carter was
that
talking about.
yes exactly. That's turned out it was a year long, basically a deep sea port with year long water in the Arctic. The government did step in and ended up killing that deal once enough. Once basically there was enough attention brought on the fact they weren't just selling China one of our gold mines, which I personally
But
think was bad enough.
what they have been doing,
Um,
like that's what I'm saying, is like that one
yep,
they killed that one because it was egregious. But there's like a ton of other mines that have been bought up by like Chinese companies, but we all know that Chinese companies are affiliated with the CCP.
yep.
So it's like,
Um, I don't know the extent of it, but I do know that that has been an ongoing issue, especially towards the start, like 9 years ago or so. China bought a number of our mines, and Trudeau, the guy, I'm not going to say Trudeau personally, but the government essentially sold almost all of our stocks of precious metals. Um, and that was just
to
on the open
China.
market. Not just to China, like on the open market. We
Okay,
just
okay.
basically divested our precious metals.
Well, we're about to
Um,
find out what's up in Fort Knox.
oh, I've heard the conspiracy that it's actually empty, but
Yeah,
I think the Germans did actually get what they requested back.
did they?
I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know where they ended up getting it from, but I think you guys did eventually send them the gold that they requested. Because I remember, because that specifically popped up in my mind, and I looked it up a little while ago, and yeah, the Germans did get their gold back.
It
Um,
wouldn't surprise me though to learn that there's the less in there, but it doesn't like it technically it actually doesn't matter because we're not on a gold backed currency anyway. So we could have zero gold and it would be the same as far as the dollar is concerned. Your dollar's not redeemable for gold.
no, yeah, but my thought is that it's usually good to have something dependable around,
I
you
mean,
know?
I would agree, but
Uh,
just
like if I was making decisions, even if I'm like, oh well, like this is all just made up anyway, I'd like
yeah.
kind of have that emergency backdrop, especially with all that, I guess, like years later chattering that Russia and China might move to something that's gold backed.
Well, yeah,
I
I've been reading
mean,
that for a
and
long
Arab
time.
like and like Arab countries love trading in gold, right?
Yeah.
Like the oil barons love trading in gold.
Well, Arabs
Like
love gold
they're
in general, I think. They like to wear it. But the Arabs. But no, I was reading about the Chinese buying up gold like 10 years ago. Like in the Obama
yep.
administration, they were buying up gold just
Yeah,
to
Russia
have
and
it.
China both have just been buying hand over fist gold. So I think they're probably going somewhere with that.
Yeah.
A couple times that we've had extensive espionage, like well detailed espionage by China, though. Um, have you heard of the company Nortel? Do you remember that company?
I've heard that name, that company. I don't know. Aren't they like a cell phone company or something? Nortel.
They were a massive telecommunications company.
Yeah.
Back in 2004, about 70% of all internet traffic
Yeah.
ran on cables that Nortel invented.
Oh, they were
Um,
doing the underwater cables and shit.
Fiber optic cables. Maybe they
Yeah.
did underwater, but fiber optic in general.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, 70% of, I guess, all internet's world traffic ran on their cabling. Um, they did experience a significant amount of financial mismanagement. They went
Many such
down when,
cases.
yeah, like boomers were fucking wild, man. Boomers were fucking wild at
Dude.
that time. Um, but in 2004, their cybersecurity specialist discovered that an executive's account had been compromised, and that about 450 documents containing some of their most protected research had been downloaded to a warehouse, downloaded to a server that was being hosted out of a warehouse in Shanghai.
Okay.
Um, he discovered, like over the course of his investigation, that a further 7 executives that had their credentials compromised discovered actual backdoors in their like in their various systems that they were losing files from, that they were going away, all to this warehouse in Shanghai.
Yeah.
Um, on April 24th, 2004, there was a massive download of 779 files, about 780 files, all to this warehouse. 4 days after that, the CEO at the time, Frank Dunn, was fired, and it was for accounting irregularities. Like, there doesn't seem to be
Mm.
any other conspiracy there. Like, he was fired for that. Weird that the timing was what it was. Shields brought all of his findings to the next CEO, and basically the guy said, like, "You're full." Like, okay, cool, man. This looks like paranoid nerd stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Paranoid nerd stuff.
Over the next decade, Shields obviously continued his investigation because this is fucking weird, right? Uh, 2009, this company went bankrupt. 2008, at a critical point in like their financial struggles, Bell Canada was offering a massive, massive contract to implement fiber optics across Canada. They were underbid by Huawei by about 40% to install 3G cables. This was Telus and Bell had this contract out. Huawei was unable to outbid them on 3G technology uh, by underbidding them by 40%.
And
Company
this was technology that probably was stolen.
that seems to be what it's building to. Like, yeah, all these files containing research,
Yeah.
everything else. But it wasn't just research that disappeared. Like, they were downloading files about financials, they were downloading corporate strategies. Um, the company went bankrupt in 2009, and in 2000, I think it was 2010 or 2012, and this is unrelated. The Department of National Defense was just looking for a new building, so they bought the old Nortel headquarters because obviously, like, to settle all their debts, everything's up, like
Yeah.
everything's up for sale. In 2013, when they were moving into the corporate headquarters, they discovered extensive listening devices because they did their
Oh damn.
usual like sensitive government bureau is moving in here. We got to do our security.
Yeah.
And here's the part: it was old. Like, this was stuff that they concluded was used to spy on Nortel. Was used to have to spy on Nortel board meetings. In addition to this, in 2000, where I have my note here, in 2005, uh, similarly embattled British company, by the name of, I think it's Martoni or Marconi. Marconi and Nortel were bidding on a contract to install 3G fiber optics for British Telecom is their name.
Yeah.
And Huawei showed up and underbid them both by, again, 40%. Weird how it's always this 40% number. And that put Marconi out of business. The
And that
next year they went
also that
bankrupt.
also means that they know how much the other company is bidding, right? Because it's not
Yep.
public what you're bidding, so they're bidding
Yep.
exactly 40% under,
Exactly.
because they're,
And
yeah.
it was 40% under Nortel's. But anyway, it's like they had access physical, like that to me
Yeah.
just looking at that, that is an extensive spying operation in denied territory by the CCP. That's the like the backdoor Nortel system that all the fucking coked up execs who are
Yeah.
all happy on their money ignored. That's one thing. Like I guess that could be done by
Physical.
somebody slipping a like some kind of program in, but physical access, extensive spying and listening equipment, like
Yeah.
that is an extensive spying operation on Canadian soil.
And that was 20
Um,
that was 20 fucking years ago. So just
exactly,
imagine what's going on
exactly.
today.
Yep. And keep in mind, Huawei has always denied that they have ever spied on their competition, and I believe them. Um, Shanghai is the home area of the PLA's Unit 61398. This is essentially their cyber war and espionage division.
This is the People's Liberation Army, the
Yes.
Chinese
Yep.
military.
Yep. So my personal, and this is completely like a layperson's assessment, my guess is the PLA looks at these potential targets in the West.
Yeah.
They cultivate the network they need to have. They collect the information. They give it to the party. The party turns around to the company like that they want to succeed,
Yeah.
and they hand them the information. Like, here you go. So Huawei stands there, and under the whatever interrogation the Americans decide to do to them,
Yeah.
can't possibly say that they spied on, broke into, did anything. And you guys have, look, the FBI has similar cases against Huawei in particular, and
Oh,
they
I'm
always
sure.
deny it.
Yeah.
Their CEO is a former infrastructure engineer for the PLA. But I don't I like there is, no matter what they say, there is no private company in China. I think we
Right.
all know that.
Yeah.
Like,
They have like a
incredibly
public
similar.
private partnership.
And keep in mind, this all also went down like through the 90s, early 2000s. The 5-year plan at the time was to massively expand China's internet infrastructure. So I think that's probably what happens. The party puts down the 5-year plan. Their people go to work. They collect the information they need. They've got these levels of like separation and division, and suddenly there you go. Huawei has all this information. A much more recent case, because as you said, that was 20 years ago. A much more recent case was the. If you want me to talk about something else, also interrupt
No,
me.
no,
I can
no.
come back to this.
By
Was
all
our
means.
National Microbiology's lab. I can't pronounce her name, but
Is it
Dr. Key
Chinese
Hui.
name? A Chinese person?
Yes, yes. Her husband and a number of Chinese graduate students, specifically Chinese graduate students,
Yeah.
were doing research at our only level 4 lab. They were put on administrative leave in, I think it was 2020,
Yeah.
for what Public Health Agency of Canada called a policy breach.
Mm-hmm.
They said it was a policy breach, like nothing to worry about here. They're not involved in COVID, like they're not none of that weird conspiracy stuff. It was completely above the board that it is a research agreement between China and Canada is the reason that the Chinese received samples of the Ebola virus and the Nipah virus from this microbiology lab in Canada.
That
Um,
that seems like not something you should be distributing.
they were sent to the Wuhan Institute in China for research. It was above the
Well,
board, like it's going to be a vaccine research.
yeah.
Um, this is the story that CBC had, or CBC had in 2020.
Yeah.
Like it's above the board. Like
Okay.
that we
So
know about that. It's
we're
all good.
sending them some
These
Ebola
people,
shit. I don't know
yeah, they're
if
making a vaccine for Ebola. This with, as we know from other sources, this gain of function lab.
yeah.
Um, they're just studying vaccines. Maybe that's part of what they study. That was the story at the time. This group of individuals, the wife, the husband, and their graduate students left Canada.
Yeah.
Just last year, 2024, the CSIS report, amidst everything else, came out. Um, it was at the advice of CSIS that these doctors lost their credentials and were put on administrative leave
Yeah.
during the initial like interview or whatever. Like they got their clearance initially, like, oh yeah, we're students, we're here to study, we're here to do research, we're just a biologist, no ties. Um, Turns out this leading researcher was actually part of what is it called? China's Thousand Talents program. The stated purpose was to uh, develop new military biotechnologies, uh, improve biological counterterrorism, and yes, the prevention and control of major diseases. Um, this person has since left Canada and is currently working, it's turned out, at the Wuhan Institute of Technology in China.
The same place that definitely coronavirus did not come from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this isn't like none of this stuff is stuff I got from like conspiracy websites or anything. Like
Right.
the Nortel story was largely compiled by Global News from interviews um, with Brian Shields, the person, the cybersecurity expert who identified what was going on. Further context was given by what was his name? A former British intelligence officer who was the first basically cyber warfare specialist for the British Armed Forces. Um, this next one, like this, it's all information I just got from the CBC,
Right.
like the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Um, like nothing, like no
Yeah.
conspiracy sites whatsoever. Like this is, yeah. So it's, I can say with confidence, even if I don't want to get into the weeds on interference in our elections, that there have been extensive Chinese intelligence operations on Canadian soil.
So I think that, and like it's funny that you're like being very careful to like cite all your sources and shit, because you're like, uh like if you start talking about Chinese uh spies, people are automatically like, oh, you think the moon landing was faked? Like it, like
Yeah,
people think that
just
you're
wild shit. But
conspiracy theorist, but it's like, oh yeah, no, China wouldn't try to spy on us. That's crazy. But obviously they would, and we do that. I mean, America for sure. Like we got caught spying on Angela Merkel. You know, we had listening devices in her office or whatever. So like countries do spy on each other, but just the fact that like it seems like Canada specifically with these MPs and stuff is been like just very lackadaisical.
there had the response. Okay, so like
Yeah,
I don't know what to make of that.
that's that is always funny when, I mean, because we have that to a certain degree in the United States as well, right? Like if you criticize the media, then you're undermining Americans' faith and they won't know where to get their news from. Or that was the big one with the election thing in 2020, right? Is like if you question the results of an election, then you're undermining people's faith in the electoral process. And it's like, well,
Yeah,
no, I think the shenanigans are what
or what
are what are
undermines.
undermining people's faith in the institutions. I think it's the shenanigans. I don't think it's pointing out the shenanigans. I think it's actually the shenanigans.
Yeah,
Like,
it's what was that phrase that they all love to use? This is incredibly dangerous to our democracy, but the Romanians annulling their election or whatever Vance was talking about a couple of weeks
yeah.
ago was
Oh,
completely above board.
dude, do you know
Banning was it banning foreign funding,
foreign
foreign
funding?
NGOs?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which, by the way, the United States also, he wasn't even banning them. He was so Hungary is the only country in the EU that has this law. That is true, but it's the same law that the United States has, which it's the foreign. I forget what it's called, but it's a registrate. Like basically, if you're funded by a foreign government, you just have to register with the
yeah,
foreign registration thing, whatever it's called. And so just so that people are aware, right? It's just, hey,
yeah.
you're allowed to be Russia Today, but you have to tell us that you're funded by Moscow.
By Russia, yeah.
Yeah, like, which is seems perfectly reasonable, but the reason they don't want it in Hungary is because of all these NGOs that are funded by USAID and stuff. But hopefully they're
Yeah, to
doing,
get to
Where
get Orban out of there and put
yeah,
whoever the EU wants to
they
rubber
we
stamp.
spent my government spent millions of taxpayer dollars, uh, like on campaigning in Hungary to get rid of Viktor Orban, right? Like,
That's like that is that's so crazy, man.
and then he
Like,
won the election anyway,
yeah,
and then they're like, well, he's undermining democracy. Like, he's not a Democrat. Like, he's a authoritarian. It's like he's winning
yeah,
elections, but it's like,
yeah. I,
how can you possibly?
uh,
But the Romanian thing is crazy because what they claimed, like, so basically what they claimed was the same thing that they said in 2016 here, which is that um, Russia paid for some Facebook ads, and that's why these like right wing parties won.
yeah,
And so therefore the election is invalid, which is crazy because
and
like,
the court can overturn it.
and the
I mean,
court can just overturn the election. But the best part is that they actually did research into uh, who actually funded that campaign, and it wasn't Russia, it was the EU. Like,
what really?
yeah, like the EU. I'll link it in the show notes. The guy that did the research on it from Breaking Points, but he like basically so like they were doing the thing where they fund the far right or the far left, whichever, but it's usually the far right, right? Like they were doing like the same reason that they were like Democrats were funding Donald Trump in 2016 because they thought if
Yeah,
he won the primary, then he'd be easier to beat than like a moderate,
yeah.
right? And so they fucked up. And the EU was literally funding this far right party in Romania in the hopes that they would take votes from the center right party, then the left would win. But instead, they got too many votes. Like, it was too effective, and they were like, "No, it was Russia," but it wasn't even Russia. It was
It was
them.
them. That's wild. I can't believe I hadn't heard that yet. Man, I can't wait to dig into that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
But yeah, okay.
uh,
So how, like, I mean, uh, you've got MPs that are working for the Chinese government. I guess that's fine as long as people know that they're working for the Chinese and they still elect them. Then I guess that's fine.
we don't have the names of the people who have benefited from
Oh,
this.
we
Like
don't even know
the
who they
one,
are. We just know
yeah,
some
the
people.
the one guy who we know
Somebody knows.
almost for sure. I think his name is Handong or something. He has been removed from the Liberal caucus and is sitting as an independent. He just happens to vote the exact same way that the Liberals do every time.
Oh, sure.
Um, he's the only one we know almost for sure directly has direct ties to this. Um, we don't know. Trudeau, I can't think of what the name is right now, but basically created this other layer of secrecy around it, where you have to go and you have to sign a new NDA. All of our, I believe, MPs have like top secret security clearance just because to do their job.
Right.
But this is a specific thing where once you know, you can't talk about it. You can't go out and talk to the media about it. And who knows how far that will extend if it goes to court. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if Polivier, as leader of the opposition, goes in there and looks at it and is like, damn, that's fucked up. He also can't turn around and kick the people if there are conservatives involved in this. He can't kick them out of the party immediately because then it does actually compromise like intelligence investigations, right? Like it might
Yeah.
reveal how they found out when and where and like which agent was working this and discovered it. So he can look at it, he can't do anything about it, and then he can't talk to the media about it either. Like he can't turn around and be like on the campaign trail, like, why haven't you told us who the like MPs are? Because then he's kind of violated the terms of the agreement, violated security clearance, and is susceptible to being arrested. Thomas Mulcair, the former head of the NDP, was it Mulcair? Yeah, I think it was Mulcair, wrote a decent article like at the start of this because the liberals were trying to make it a thing like, what are you hiding? What are you hiding by not getting this special super clearance that Justin Trudeau made up so that you could see this? Um,
So they're trying to make it sound like the other people are
yeah,
like the
exactly.
conservatives, which, I mean, I guess if I was China, I'd play both sides. Like, there's no reason not to.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Like it would be nice to have this information, going into the next election.
Yeah.
Uh,
One might argue that it has some bearing on the way that you vote, like Hunter Biden's laptop, but times a million because these are Chinese spies.
yeah, yeah, and like none of, I guess to temper the allegation a bit, none of them are
Spies.
accused of being agents or sources. They are
They're
the
benefiting from
yeah,
Chinese
benefiting
funding.
from Chinese funding influence, and it's a question of which ones actually know about it, because some of them explicitly do know.
So
Um,
some of them know, some of them might not know. So it might be like the case of like, so like when Russia was, to the extent that they were funding Facebook ads for like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders as well. No one ever talks about that. Like basically they were just anti-Clinton because, I mean, from Russia's perspective, it makes a lot of sense to not want Hillary Clinton to be president because she would probably fund a bunch of NGOs to like fuck around in your near abroad, right? So like we are the global empire, and so other people do have to care about who our elected officials are. And so if they want to buy Facebook ads, then I don't really think it's a big deal. But if they were explicitly calling the candidate up or like talking to the candidate and being like, hey, we're going to help you out, then does seem like there's an implied quid pro quo there where the
yep,
candidate would do something like, um, you know, send bombs to Israel if they got money from APAC or something like that. Not that
yep.
anyone would do that, but
Nobody,
hypothetically,
nobody in the American system is at all compromised by Israeli funding.
dude,
That that tweet following, I think it was the one of your various elections down there. I think it was for the House and Senate, or one of your interim elections, where they're like every IPAC candidate won, and you're
yeah,
looking at it like Democrat or Republican. See it, like
it
like
pays to
yeah,
support Israel, and you're like, I don't know if you're
yeah,
supposed to
exactly.
say that. I don't
Out
know if you're
loud.
supposed to say that out loud. Well, I mean, when Mossad has videos of you at Epstein's Island, I mean, what can you do? But
Yeah,
we're gonna get that
and
list, though. I heard.
the Epstein list.
Yeah, apparently it's on Pam, whatever her name is, the Attorney General, the new Attorney General has. She said something. I mean, she could be full of shit, but Attorney General, what the fuck is her name? The blonde girl, Pam Bondi. She was. They were. Somebody was asking her about. They were asking her about the JFK files, and they were asking her about Epstein's client list, and she said Epstein's client list is on her desk and she's reviewing it for the public. Like she's going to release
Really?
it. Yeah, I think. I. What did she say about this? Something like that. Like she might have just been
Oh, that
talking out of her ass. Let's see.
yeah. Like if that's real, then
Yeah,
that's like that would
but
be beyond anything I would expect. I'll put it that way. Like
yeah,
that'd be
but
beyond
so
my expectation.
but honestly, at like so far, like everything in the Trump administration has been beyond my expectations. So at this point, I'm pretty open to things being like I'm pretty white pilled down here. See, that's why you should join us. It's white pill down here, bro. Like
It's a white pill down here.
the the alleged client list of blah 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 is on Attorney General Pam Bondi's desk. She said in an interview Friday, making the elusive document one step closer to potential public release. She said she has not yet seen any major revelations from the closely guarded document, but she is in the process of reviewing it at President Trump's direction under an executive order to declassify federal secrets.
Oh my God. Well, shit's gonna get wild down there. Wow.
Yeah, dude, shit's already wild, man. Like that's what I'm saying. So this is my pitch, man. I'm telling you, you guys got to come join the party. And but everybody, like I was surprised that the based Canadians were, well, like you said, it was like Azov, right? It's like we're nationalists, you're nationalists, but we're in different nations, so we're not quite on the same team. But like the way that I looked at it was, you've got these problems that we're talking about. You've got Chinese uh, influence. You've got these Trudeau senators. You've got this bureaucratic state out of control, and you've got high ass prices for housing and food and stuff. You've got low wages, and you've got sort of milk toast conservatives who like seem pretty cool, but they're not going to really stem the tide, right? They're certainly not going to deport, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, probably.
and it, maybe we don't need to annex Canada, but maybe we need to help you guys help yourselves somehow, you know?
Yeah, like the the way I see it, like we are fundamentally, I think, we're very similar nations. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
Um, like I kind of divide it into like the philosophical, the political, and like the personal, right?
sure.
Like there are some serious philosophical differences between the United States and Canada. Like you guys are like a kind of a proposition nation founded on the ideas of like freedom, like liberty, uh, the pursuit of property, or happiness. Um, whereas we like our founding ideals are like peace, order, good government. Um,
Which I
like
kind of like
there are,
better personally.
I think I think you kind of need one for the other when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
Um, like there's always going to be that kind of like deep love for your own country, I think, for people who are serious about it. Um, I mean, if you're talking about just regime changing us as some kind of like
Yeah.
rescue mission, like Jesus,
Yeah,
um,
we'll coup your government. Many such cases.
many such cases, Jesus. Um, what like looking into the future, I would have imagined like over like 100, 150 years that there would be more integration between our countries. So I'm kind of rambling. Um,
Yeah.
to back it up, I also see the American perspective and the perspective of the American empire, right? Like we are compromised. We've done some pretty stupid things. Like our government's done some pretty stupid things. Um, and economically, there's not a lot of hope for the future. We like like from the American empire's perspective, you guys have been telling us for more than a decade, like to get ourselves straightened away. Like that's what I read into Obama's like the world needs more Canada speech, right? Like I think at the end of his presidency,
Oof.
when he came up and said this, and like all of our politicos and like media like circle jerked about this because he like was congratulating Canada, but he's saying like the world's changing. We have like enemies we're gonna have to face. Like you guys like what's going on with your military spending? What's going on with this? At the time it was something fit like if we had committed back then to being a different nation than we are now, I think this would be a very different conversation. But to be blunt, looking at the economic outlook for our country, how indebted we are, uh, the yes, mass immigration, the various barriers to any sort of innovation. I haven't even gone into talking about our various taxes and the absurdity of it. Um, the like between our social unrest, and this is once again this is from the RCMP. They, for lack, like
And
just to summarize, the RCMP came
what's
out
the
and said
RCMP? That's the Royal Canadian
Canadian Mounted
Mounted
Police.
Police. Okay.
They're a kind of like
They're like
catch-all
your
FBI.
feds.
Yeah, feds, FBI. Like there are a bunch of different things all kind of rolled into one sort of pseudo paramilitary organization that also happens to do policing in some regions of our country.
Okay.
Um, they basically said
I mean,
when Canadians
that's
find
kind
out,
of base, to be honest. Like, we need a paramilitary police force in the United States.
oh
Maybe
man,
we should
I'll
get.
come on another time and talk about how actually like the RCMP. as an idea. It sounds super based.
But it's
They've also
actually
been
super
caught.
gay.
They've been caught planting bombs on farmers' lands for oil companies to give an excuse to
Uh,
seize the property. To seize the
Jesus
property.
Christ. All right.
Um,
So they're the
so
Pinkerton
this is
gang. They're the
yeah.
they're the
They
federal
they
Pinkerton gang.
also like I'm not gonna trash talk them too much. Like they do good work. They uphold order. They do all the stuff you're supposed to do. But like just remember, feds are feds.
Yeah.
um, but man, what was I saying? But basically, they had a giant report that came out that said as soon as young Canadians realized how fucked their future is, there is going to be mass civil unrest. So what I see is the American Empire having told us for a very long time to like show that we can continue to govern our country, right?
Yeah.
Like we can provide that kind of sane, reasonable, stable governance, a similar culture, similar everything. Geopolitical tensions are rising, and we're like a dumpster fire on your northern border. Like I definitely see that perspective. I also see the perspective where to most Canadian, like to the average Canadian, like they aren't kind of tapped into the political stuff that I'm talking about here,
Right.
right? Like the average day-to-day person
They're
doesn't
into
know
like
this.
Reddit shit.
Not even that. Like leaving all politics aside, I'm not talking about anybody who's involved in politics, just the surface level, like the understanding is that we have always been close allies. We've been close friends. Most people, normal, average people, have family and friends on both sides of the border. Like we go down there, we fight fires alongside you. We like I said, every single war since the Great War has had Canadians fighting alongside Americans, even if our government isn't involved in the war. And then there's like significant ones like obviously Afghanistan, Korea, World War Ones and Two. Um, and then like things that like after 9/11, we as flights were being diverted, we took a lot of Americans into our homes too, right? Like
Yeah.
we have always been like a kind of close ally, friend, and suddenly you're like, we're gonna hit you with 25% tariffs. That's kind of the perspective of someone who doesn't have any idea about the political machinations going on in the background, right?
Yeah. And because Trump is so Canada already has tariffs on us, right? And so the reason that Trump's doing that is because he's trying to negotiate some trade deals. But because he's so like braggadocious and like out there about it, it gets a lot of media attention. So these people that you're talking about, they just see we're hanging out, we're friends with America, and then suddenly we're getting slammed with these huge tariffs, these like ridiculous tariffs that he probably doesn't even really mean to implement, right? But it's just
Yeah,
bad. It's
exactly.
bad
And
optics.
it's not just not yeah, and obviously, like as you know, the suggestion that something can go is going to go bad in your economy, like can also cause that thing to go wrong. Like people pull investment, people do this, our dollar falls further. Those tariffs are, if they were implemented, would like put a large number of people out of work. And like Olivier gets up there in front of the camera and does talk about this, and it's correct. Like the reason we're so susceptible to them is because of the weakness in our economy.
Yeah.
But people like you don't get into the numbers like that. You're like, oh, it's so shitty that my pay is this. It's because the corporations aren't willing to pay me more.
Yeah.
Like, why won't anybody respond to my resume? Like, what's going on? And without that context, it literally just looks like Donald Trump, the big fascist tyrant, wants to conquer North America.
Which I mean, to be fair, that would be pretty cool. Like we should reconstitute Rome, but
You guys
yeah,
finally get the from sea to yeah, from sea
but
to
well,
shining
I don't know
sea.
because I mean we've been putting we put sanctions on Iran, and that seemed to work out really well for us. So I think,
Jesus.
so I think if we, I think no, I think based on what was really interesting to me is that Obama said that we need more Canadas in the world, right? Because, and then that ties back to what we were talking about, like the liberals being very similar to the Democrats. Is like there is this global, the globalists, but the, but like there is like a network of transnational elites who all sort of agree with each other, and Obama was on that team. And so when he sees Canada, he's like, we need more Canadas, right? But when I see Canada, I'm like, that's fucked, right?
Oh no,
But
we this was 10 years ago. We actually weathered the previous crisis pretty well.
oh, okay. So
Um,
he was
I
he
took it as I wasn't even going in the direction of the like background stuff of I think the term that is getting tossed around is global socialism. I took it as because Obama was very much about pivoting like to the Pacific, like
okay.
recognizing China as a rising threat.
Yeah.
Like I think he was kind of predicting an unstable world where like provided like where his allies needed to be squared away, you know,
Yeah. Okay.
where like we couldn't just go to the like keep going with 0.75% of GDP or whatever it was towards our military. Like we needed to build it out. Like
So you
Canada,
guys were dumping a bunch of spending into your military at that time.
no, we weren't. It was the opposite.
Well, then why would he?
The
Why would he?
conservatives actually.
Why would he say that?
What I'm saying is like to get us up to speed to make sure we were ready to go. Um, like our soldiers are in missions across the world, right? Like
Okay, so he
we're in
was
Latvia,
saying
Poland, yeah,
we need more people who are sending their troops abroad.
yeah, and like who provide, I guess, stable democratic governance everywhere, you know.
Because
And
what I was thinking is that, like, America hasn't been, like, you're talking, like, we had that Swalwell guy who was banging a Chinese spy, like, literally, right? He was a
oh
senator or
God, yeah,
something.
I remember
Yeah.
him, yeah.
And so, like, obvious, like, and we have Chinese. So actually, I just saw something the other day. Might have actually been this day, but it was like some executive order. Trump's been signing a shit ton of executive orders. Like, the one good thing about him losing 2020, and then coming back in 2024 is that, like, Vance is way better than Pence, right? And he had 4 years to, like, get a real team together, and there's some smart people doing smart shit. And some one of these executive orders was something about, like, Chinese funding for science, for research in our universities, because there was a bunch of, obviously Chinese nationals in our academic institutions, like, complaining, and they're trying to send their research to Canada, and, like, and people were sort of saying, like, oh, spies, right? So, like, we
Jesus.
I
I
don't I'll have
don't know
to
if I've heard that one, but that's yeah,
I mean,
that would be quite the network.
it might be a little bit of,
I
like, conspiracy stack a little bit, but I'll have to look up exactly what was going on. But they were like, I mean, all these academics are, like, hyperbolic about Trump, so they're trying to make it sound like he's
he's
destroying
gonna
scientific research in America.
yeah,
But
he's ending the science.
yeah, he's ending the science. How will we know how many genders there are? But the the point I was making is that, like, we had just as many problems as Canada, and we, still, like, it's not, like, gone, right? Like, everybody's been real excited about the last month, but, obviously we had a bunch of crazy ass shit that we had to deal with. But, if we can sort of turn it around, then that can be, rather than invading Canada and regime changing you, which I admit would be kind of hilarious. I, if
Yeah,
we,
I'd be fucking laughing like, jeez,
what
my
we,
house just explodes.
yeah. Unfortunately, like, there's a lot of civilian casualties in those regime change operations, so that would be the only, like, drawback, right? But yeah, we would, you guys could, like, vote for your version of Trump, you know, you guys could see it, like all these people that you're talking about who are like, oh, my grocery bill is high, I can't afford a house, and my job sucks, would finally kind of be like, well, why don't we try that? Because it seems like things are really working out pretty well down there, and sort of do a similar thing, you know? And maybe
Yeah,
we could inspire, be the, rather than enforce,
yeah,
right?
yeah, like yeah, if you're talking, yeah, and like inspiring a change, yeah, if it were, yeah,
And then we could rent like land for our military bases in Canada.
No, no, wait. This is just annexation again. Oh man. No, I mean,
No, we,
I guess it's like let us see if we can like let us see if we can sort it out. But at the same time, it's like, is that time up? Like we have a lot to fix. The world is changing. Like America has Mexico on its southern border and doesn't need like I get it, like doesn't need another collapsed state on its northern border. Um yeah, I don't have a solution to these problems, honestly.
yeah, well, I do. No,
Oh
so
god.
oh god, no. Okay, so I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. I've been looking at pictures of Alberta. Do you guys still need to see my fucking medical papers for me to get into Canada? Am I allowed to come to Canada now?
Yeah. Yeah, all that stuff dropped.
All right.
There is no vaccine requirement to come into Canada. All of the COVID measures disappeared with the truckers.
All right. Hell yeah.
They rolled out of
See?
Ottawa, and the COVID measures went away.
See, why don't you guys do that for more stuff?
Good question. We're probably getting there.
Yeah. I just wish it didn't always have to get so bad before it got better, but I guess that's human nature.
Yep.
It's like a AA meeting.
I was thinking that Tolkien quote, honestly.
Yeah.
The I wish this hadn't happened in my time. Like, well, it has. Cope. Or whatever it was Gandalf said.
Yeah, I think that was. I think that's what. I think that's the line. Bingo's like, bingo. I call Bilbo Bingo now. Uh, Bilbo's like, oh, I wish that that this hadn't happened to me. And Gandalf just looks at him, takes a big drag of his pipe, and he says, "Cope and sieve, faggot."
What, you just gonna die?
Yeah. All right.
Okay, well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Where we? Oh, you don't have like a Substack or anything. You're just my buddy.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have you back on
Just some
again
random
sometime.
Canadian you
Just
like
some
pulled
random
off the
Canadian.
street to
Yeah.
talk about this stuff.
I actually kidnapped you. You were
Annexed my
visiting.
house.
Yeah, I annexed
Annexed my apartment building.
I annexed your apartment like a Chilean gang member.